Hey guys, it's Lazy, and in today's video, I want to talk about my next League starter, which is going to be a Cold Elementalist playing as a Wintertide brand version. Now, despite the nerf that is coming in 3.27, I believe that Elementalist is still going to be one of the top, if not the most flexible ascendancies coming into the next patch. This is due to the new Bloodline Ascendancies coming into the game, but I will elaborate on that a bit later. But overall, if you're looking for a very relaxing, comfy playstyle League starter that is going to take you to 2 Void Stone, 4 Void Stone, and generic mapping to farm currencies, Cold Elementalist is gonna be one of my top choice. Now, I'm not actually sure if the full patch note is out, and if I'm gonna make a predictions, even if they are going to change something, it's probably nothing too significant that it's gonna affect this particular build anyway. So in the patch note, Liege of the Primordial essentially got nerfed. You might think it got nerfed by half, right? Because it goes from 100% increased effect of golems to 50%. But ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it's roughly 12% nerf in overall DPS. This is because the nodes stack additively with any of the increased effect of golems, and in the endgame we'll be stacking Primordial Bond, which means that effectively we are losing like 1 Primordial Bond. Once again, not an issue at all. And for the early game part, it's not going to affect you too much. This is because the whole ascendancy is still the same. Liege of the Primordial provides a lot of the QOLs, like, summon golems are immune to LA damage. You can resummon golems after 4 seconds, right? So, and then you have 2 maximum number of golems. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things, you're still going to be able to run 4 golems in the early games. And in the end game setups, it's roughly 10 to 12% damage. Given that this particular ascendancy's node was like OP before, I think now it's just become a really good ascendancy point. Next up, we have the Cold skills. Now, we are using mainly Wintertide brand, and Cold Snap is really kind of just there to apply chill. But yeah, most of these skills are relatively going to be the same. Nothing is changed or specified in the patch note, so we'll have to see. But overall, I'm expecting this to just, stay the same. Wintertide brand and Cold Snap feels really good for mapping. And finally, in an attempt to nerf Trickster, Suppressions is also getting nerfed. In my opinion, it's not really going to be a problem for the early game setups of this build. I tend to just go for Evasion and ES, just because Evasion feels really good for scaling into red maps, but ultimately in the end game where you need to be tanky, armor and block probably gonna win out. So yeah, especially this league when aura is gonna be a little bit tight because we don't have mercenaries, I think armor and block Aegis aura setups for the endgame is gonna be what I'm going for. So yeah, suppression nerf, not going to be a problem. Now, if you haven't seen my previous video, I talk about the leveling setups and everything. But yeah, I believe I had one of the smoothest and comfiest leveling experience with these setups, and it was all the way from level 12 all the way into the endgame. The ascendancy is like incredibly front loaded. When you get to level 34 and you can start using your golems and also your first lap and get that Liege of Primordial, it's all gonna be smooth sailing from there. You're gonna outscale the campaign pretty much, and yeah, overall it is very smooth and comfy if you are a beginner player and you are looking to just kind of go through the campaign and transitioning into maps. Now, when you get to map, there's actually a few very strong, unique options for you to get, and I'll get into that in the item sections, but it's gonna be a pretty comfy mappers. Scales well into red maps on a budget, and that's what you really want for a League starter to have an early and strong mid-game scaling. For the end game, you do have options to go into Primordial Bond stackings. Of course, getting those Primordial Bond Megalomaniac is expensive, but it is an incredible caster shell that you can do if you plan to push Elementalists into the end game. Which brings me to my last point, is that, Cold in my opinion, is really good for early and mid games, and it doesn't really belong in the end game, especially when there are skills like Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice still exists, and I know the Whisper of Infinity ES nerf is kinda huge, but yeah, it's still probably going to be better than the Cold shell. And that brings me to my next point. Elementalist is incredible. So you have two options for League Start. You can play Wintertide brand Kodot as an Occultist, or you can play that as an Elementalist. Another thing is that in PoE 1, you are also not locked to your Ascendancies, so you can very easily just play an Elementalist and then you can swap to an Occultist setups a bit later. Now with that out of the way, I think Occultists will have probably better endgame options as a pure Ascendancies, just because of how it scales the defensiveness with damage and also with the spell suppression nerf. I think, Vibe Ashen is just gonna be a lot stronger, but we have options to get that on the Forbidden Flame and Flesh. But another thing I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is that we have Bloodline Ascendancies. And what it means is that in terms of pure Ascendancies, Occultists might be better for the endgame, but in terms of flexibility, Elementalist is like really front-loaded, which means that you only need Liege of the Primordial. You have options to get shocks, chill, or ignites if you need that in your build. Otherwise, you're gonna have like 4 extra Ascendancy points to spec into any of these strong Bloodlines Ascendancies that is coming. And if you play Legacy of Frisia, some of them are bound to be broken, and so yeah, if you want to have fun, I guess play Elementalist. And Kodot is just a safe League starter that allows you to kind of pivot into any of those builds. And finally, another thing is I talk about flexibility, and I really mean it. Primordial Bonds provides a really strong shell, and this shells will allow you to run many different endgame skills and setup. And especially this league, we're getting a new Bloodline Ascendancies, and Bloodline Ascendancies, I'm not sure what it's gonna be, but usually Ascendancies in PoE 1 is a lot stronger than PoE 2, which means that some of these Ascendancies might actually be build-endable, and having a flexible shell is gonna allow you to experiment and run many different kind of setups. Now let's get into the pros and cons of this build if you are planning to League start this. First of all, the pros, I think it's a very solid and safe starter. You can't really go wrong with this, even if you are a beginner. And especially if you are a beginner player, you really want to follow a well-written guide, because once you get through the whole campaigns and get into mapping, it gets a lot smoother. The build also need to be cheap because new player can't really farm currency. This is gonna be a very budget and comfy mapper as well. Our budget setups with like some really cheap unique items, and also kind of viable to find them in SSF as well. It's gonna take you to red maps without any issues. And the next thing is, this build is not really a glass cannon, because we're gonna have evasions, ES, and this kind of build tends to be on the tankier side of the spectrums. It's not like tanky, I'll say, but it's not like in the one-shot territory. So we also have chill for mapping, and then my particular version, I go for evasion, so it's gonna be pretty comfy for pushing red maps. And then we also have the golems. Obviously, Stone Golem give us regens, extra defensive stats. Chaos Golem give us chaos resistance. So yeah, Golem is still a thing, and it's gonna give you sustain and defense. So this is not going to be a glass cannon build. And then our damage uptime is also pretty good on the setups, because Wintertide brand, you just put down the brand's gonna stick to the targets and do the damage. And in the meantime, you can just kind of like shield charge, moving around. So it's gonna have better uptime than those kind of melee build. And the last thing is, I kind of mentioned previously in the Ascendancy setups, but if we run this, we're gonna be highly flexible for any upcoming 3.27 Bloodline Ascendancies if you choose to run it. Of course, it remains to be seen, like what is good or what's bad, but yeah. And then for the cons of this build, I'll say, it's a 2-button playstyle, but it's not like the traditional 2-button playstyle. It's more like you casting Wintertide brand as a 1-button playstyles, but we do have to use Cold Snap to kind of optimize the gameplay because it gives us Frenzy Charge. When you have enough damage, I guess you can also play this as a 1-button playstyle. With that being said, we do have lower single target DPS than maybe some other setups. Mainly because we are playing a dots build, and then the skills, it's good for mapping, it's decent, but it's not like crazy single target DPS kind of thing. So if you want to farm boss on League Start, probably you don't want to start this. And then the last one is for the end game pretty much, because we do have a budget mapping setups. Scaling this into the end game, you are going to have to compete with other people for the Primordial Bond setups, which at this time of this recording is still one of the best way to scale Golem into the end game. And because Primordial Bond is something we get on the Megalomania as well, so finding those Megalo and compete with a lot of people is gonna be a problem. I think Elementalist is gonna be one of the more popular ascendancies this league as well. So don't say I didn't warn you, but I think Elementalist is gonna be expensive for the endgame. So when it comes to Wintertide brand, I do want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of the skills, because if you just read the in-game descriptions, I feel like you might have missed what's going on, right? So Wintertide brand works through two separate debuffs. So the first debuff is the Wintertide. This is going to be your main damage source, because this one happens when brand is actually attached to the enemy. It's gonna continuously chills, deal damage over time, and then the damage scales with the stage. So think about this like the brand, every time it activates, it's gonna gain a stage, and you're gonna do maximum damage at 20 stage. The stage goes with the brand, so even if the brand is jumping between targets, you are keeping the brand stage, and they are also calculated independently, and multiple of these debuff also stacks, which means that if you have 3 brand on the same targets, you're gonna do maximum amount of damage. The way you scale the damage of this is essentially getting longer brand durations, but also higher cast speed, so you have higher uptime at 20 stage. Essentially, you do not want to spam the skills, because if you accidentally just remove one of the brand when it doesn't reach 20 stage yet, then suddenly you are just losing damage. So the next thing is, whenever the brand detach from an enemy, either from being expire, recall, enemies dead, or anything, right, it triggers the second debuff, which is called Wintertide, and this one will create like an AoE mist cloud kind of thing around the targets, which also chill and deal cold dot. The crucial thing here is that the Wintertide ends damage is gonna snapshot the damage from whatever the Wintertide debuff that was doing damage when it detached. So if your Wintertide only go up to 15 stage and it expire, then the Wintertide end damage only go up to 15 stage. Alright, so now you understand that we do need to do debuff, and we do need to get the skill to 20 stage, which means that you want to focus on scaling activation frequencies and durations of the brands. So you can get activation frequencies through Swift brand support, brand search, but mainly you are going to scale cast speed to get more activation frequencies, and the more cast speed you have, the faster that your brand is going to get to 20 stage. We also need to scale the durations of the brand as well. This is because if you get to 20 stage and your brand expire, it's not maximize your damage. You have to have like your brand stay at 20 stage for longer if you want to maximize your damage. And so the best way to scale this is we're gonna scale both durations and more cast speed for higher frequency, and you will get higher DPS. And notably, you don't really want to spam the skill too much when mapping, because you want your brand to get to 20 stage before expiring them, because if you go over the brand limits, you're gonna expire the oldest brand, and if you're casting too fast, you're gonna expire it before it gets to 20 stage. Alright, so when it comes to the PoE, I do have this kind of set up roughly. I'm going to continuously update this PoE and think about what to put in the notes sections. Right now I only have the rejects in here, but the campaign setup is already kind of finished. So you can see here I have it set up. So I have a video on it already, if you prefer that kind of visual. But in the PoE I also have it set up like this. So you go from X1, each of these quests you're gonna grab new skill gems, and then we are swapping at level 12. And I goes into details of each act and how to progress your skills. And in the tree sections, essentially, you know, you can choose the loadout for campaign. And then in here, I also have the leveling trees from, you know, many trees, essentially from 1 to 12. which is when we are using Rolling Magma. You can kind of see that we take Firewalker here. And then going to 12 and 18, then we swap over to Frostwalker because we swap to the cold dot setups. And then that's pretty much it. And then you can just kind of follow the tree all the way until 68, which is when the campaign ends. And then you're gonna swap over to transition to map setups. So going from the campaign into transition to maps. I also provide 2 skill trees over here as the progression steps to go from the campaign. And then a little bit of respect. And you should get to roughly level 85 with this tree. It is very cheap. It is only on a 4 link. If you have a 5 link, you're gonna have around 1.6 million DPS, which is really good for the early game. And the items is incredibly cheap as well. We are leveraging the minions percent damage with spiritual aids to give us tons of damage early on. And this weapon is really easy to craft. All you need to do is to basically craft with Essence of Fear on any base of 1 that you want, as long as it has the implicit for minions increased damage or spell damage. And then you just need to craft cold dots damage over time multiplier on this. And then Ram Gaze is incredible for the setups because it gives us 50% cold damage over time. And then that's pretty much it. Everything else is basically just rare items, and if you are playing on SSF, instead of getting the Ram Gaze, you can also use Essence of Fear, which is buff in 3.27s, to craft helmets to get the same increased percentage damage. Minion deals increased percentage damage, which also work with this build. So yeah, on a 4 link or 5 link, this can easily help you get to red map and transitions into the early game very smoothly. Then in the configuration tabs, basically we have frenzy checked because Cold Snap can give us frenzy. As long as the boss have ads, you're gonna have it. But if you unchecked it, we lose about 200,000 DPS. And just keep in mind, we want to get our 4th lap point at this point because conversion do give us a lot of single target DPS. And then you can kind of see here, I already account for the nerf coming in 3.27, which is 50% reduced effective buff granted by your golems. And because we have Wintertide and debuff as well, we do a little bit more than 200% more damage because we have 3 Wintertide brand. As I explained in the mechanics sections, essentially 3 Wintertide brand is gonna do 3 separate kind of debuff. And then we also have the Wintertide and debuff as well, so yeah, we do roughly a bit more than 200% more damage. I'm not actually sure what is the best and accurate way to calculate this, but this is just gonna be a rough estimate, so we might do more or we might do less damage. And that's pretty much it for the tree. If you want, you can focus a bit on cold resistant at this point, because we do go for this cold mastery right here, to give us cold damage over time multiplier for any 4% over cap cold. And then we have the minus 30 fire res to get +1 to level up all cold skill gem. And then we text a few suppression note, but we're not looking for capping at this point. Alright, next up is gonna be the budget red map setups. Essentially at this point we are roughly level 90, and I'll say we gonna swap to the pseudo 5 link, so it's still going to be pretty cheap. You don't need to have a 6 link at this point. And because we are going for this replica allelopathy, this is an items that gonna come from Heist. I think it's gonna be pretty common, and because Heist is going to be quite popular as well with the change, I think this is still going to be pretty cheap. And Donor Damning is also very cheap and unique and common items as well. You can also use Anathema at this point if you want. But any other items is still pretty much ES evasion gears. We do have a little bit of implicits to give us golem effect. Just kind of follow this gear roughly right here. For the weapons, we are getting some sort of better weapon at this point. You can try to get a damage over time multipliers and spell damage one, and then you can craft on any generic damage like spell damage, cold damage, depending on what your one is missing. And yeah, we just spec down of the minions node over here so we can text more defensive note like capping out suppressions. Going for ES and evasion setup is gonna give you a good time trying to push into red maps. It's probably not as tanky as like armor block-based setups, but it is very cheap and it is very smooth. Configuration tabs is roughly the same as already accounts for the 3.27 nerf. And this is a pseudo 5-link. I'm not sure why hypothermia doesn't work with this POB right here. But yeah, I just want to give you like a rough idea on what is the damage if hypothermia does work on POB. And then yeah, cold snaps on the ram gaze, essentially getting you like a pseudo 5-link as well. This will give you tons of damage for the early games and good enough to push and farm red maps. And the next thing is we're going to swap into a low life swap setup. And this is the next steps in going for farming the end games. Which means that we are going to just get pain attunement, we gotta find way to reserve our life and also be protected from the damage. So ultimately I ended up with an Aegis Aurora setups. So this is gonna be kinda expensive at this point, so you want to farm a lot of red maps with the setups, do whatever farming strats for the early game that you want, and then transition into this. In the low life swap setups, you probably cannot do expeditions just because it have calling, but any other setup should be okay. Just keep note that in this low life setups, I do run the trader keystone, which require you to get a brutal restraints. Just anything that should be okay, that should works. We are running coruscating elixirs, and this one should have an uptime of 100% in the POB. And as well as, you know, the Bismuth Flask and Quartz Flask to give us basically suppressions and a lot of resistance. This is one of the tech that I kinda used last league, and it's still going to be pretty strong. And then Ashes of the Star is gonna be one of the biggest damage boosts to your build as well. So also prioritize this. And we do run Skitterpod at this point to apply the curse. So we have double curse, so frostbite and elemental weakness. Overall, this setup is gonna give you roughly around 7 million DPS, which is good enough for full void stone and doing a lot of the end game, like the early end game content. And I really would not invest in more, but yeah, I do have a mesh blood setups, which I'm not gonna get into right now. But feel free to check it out. And for the weapons, basically, you want to use Essence Craft on a Fracture base to get this kind of weapons. You're looking for +1 to all cold spell skill gems, Fractures, and we're gonna use Essence that give cast speed, anything that you are comfortable with. And then we're gonna roll until you get spell damage percentage. I think T2 should be good enough, T1 will be very hard to get. And then you can multi-mod the rest. And Aegis Aurora, just very good shields, give you a lot of sustained Dark Monarch setups, which mean that you want to run Primordial Eminence, Anima Stone to give extra golems. All of these jewels should be relatively cheap as well. I haven't added any Megalo into the build. Even in the very expensive Mesh Blood setups, I don't run the Megalo with Primordial Bond as well, because I'm well aware that last league it goes for like 20 to like 40 divine each. So yeah, I really don't want to make that kind of setups. But we do have a Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh setups in here. But yeah, low life swap is still gonna be pretty cheap, nothing too crazy. We do run 2 small cluster here to give us block, and then this one gonna give us endurance charge when we block, which means that you can take the endurance charge, and because we have almost cap lock, it's gonna be pretty easy to kind of keep up the endurance charge. So the next thing is gonna be the body hour and stuff. I think these are relatively gonna be pretty easy to get as well. The main thing here is because we already have so much resistance coming from the flask and tie-up times, it makes it a lot easier to gear, because a lot of these gear you don't actually need to have a lot of resistance. And so yeah, you just need to have like good amount of armor, ES, and that's pretty much it, I think. And so yeah, this is gonna be the setups that I'll be running for League Start. If you like to play one character per league, and Elementalist is gonna be a really good choice just because you're gonna have a lot of flexibility to try out the Bloodline Ascendancies. Now, a lot of people have also asked me for the Power Siphon Totem Ballista update. I think it's gonna be incredibly strong, but because Hierophant is a little bit one-dimensional, and it's gonna be a bit hard to try out the Bloodline Ascendancies, so which is why I decided to list start this. But if I do have enough time, I'm going to update the POB for that roughly as well for the early game. But yeah, good luck if you are starting this. If you want to stop by my stream and say hi, I do start streaming now. I just started streaming like a few days ago. And yeah, drop me a follow. Link will be in the description of this video. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and see you in the next one.